Okay. Okay, good evening, everyone, and welcome to the March 14th special meeting of Council. The City of Parksville recognizes the people of the Coast Salish Nations and their traditional territory upon which we gather with gratitude. First of all, I'm delighted to see that there's a lot of people here this evening. That's very, very good. Very good for the process that we want to go through tonight. The purpose of this meeting is for Council to receive a report from Boulevard Traffic Consultants. The Director of Engineering will first provide context, background, and updates to work completed and feedback received to date. Boulevard Traffic Consultants are here tonight to show us traffic modeling as it exists today and in the future. Please keep in mind that the overall objective is in large measure to address questions regarding future development potential of 183 McVicker Street and the need to proceed with the much-needed Corfield Street upgrade, knowing that Council's support of the imminent Corfield upgrade may also impact the configuration of an extension to Jensen Avenue. So on that note, I'm going to ask the Director of Engineering to give us the background on this item. Mr. Figuera.
If I may, Your Worship, before Council is a report introducing today's traffic modeling in and around downtown Parksville. The focus of the report and modeling is the effect of the Jensen Avenue extension under their current configuration, which is 2 lanes, 1 in either direction, on the traffic flow in and around downtown for the existing and future 2030 traffic volumes. And those traffic volumes are based upon recent traffic data collected and projected population growth rates. Now, looking forward, the Corfield capital upgrade is pending in the 2016 plan. A report will be coming to Council either on the 21st or April the 4th, with recommendations from staff on the award of the detailed design of this street. The design of Corfield Street is interrelated with the Jensen extension, as you mentioned, Your Worship, as they share a major intersection. Therefore, the report will present options for the configuration and timing of the Jensen Avenue extension based on the results of course, past studies and public feedback, along with the input received during today's meeting. Could you change the slide, Mike? So what I'm going to do is just describe what the current configuration of Jensen Avenue extension is as represented in the budget. So the Jensen Avenue is currently configured as a downtown urban collector, similar to the existing Jensen Avenue west of Corfield. The combined works include approximately 390 meters of collector downtown road standard from Corfield Street east to Highway 19A at McVicker Street, and 55 meters of local road standard on McVicker Street. The work also includes approximately 260 meters of storm sewer, 355 meters of water main, and 100 meters of sanitary sewer. The extent of the works needs to be confirmed by design and additional field investigations. However, it's estimated that the cost of the works will be in excess of $2 million. The following is an account of the timeline. It's just to give everyone a history of the Jensen Avenue extension project. You can see up on the slide there. The Jensen Avenue extension was first referenced in the 1983 Transportation Master Plan. A full detailed design was awarded to and completed by Coors Associates in 1994. That's a completed design, and that was a 4-lane road. For various reasons, the construction of the project was deferred at that time. And it was partially due to the Inland Island Highway project was imminent. So part of the reason why that was delayed was in anticipation of the traffic flows being significantly affected by the Inland Island Highway. Now, since 1983, the Jensen Extension project's been reviewed during each subsequent Transportation Master Plan update and in the approved 2002 Master Transportation Plan. It was identified to be needed in 2012. The 2002 Master Transportation Plan stated that this road link currently, in quotations, is not needed for capacity issues, but for the benefit of the community by improving circulation and to encourage redevelopment. The project was then accelerated to 2010 by a subsequent mayor and council. Prior to 2010, in 2009, under Council Resolution 09134, the design work for both the Jensen Avenue Extension update and the Corefield Street update was awarded to Coors once again. The original Jensen Avenue Extension design work was determined to be invalid due to the length of time, 15 years, since its original completion, and significant revisions to the official community plan and the construction of the Inland Island Highway. So now this is after the Inland Highway is installed and working. Also, Council chose to combine the Corefield Street capital upgrade work already scheduled in the 5-year plan with the Jensen work to potentially save cost on overall engineering fees for both projects. A subsequent professional services agreement was signed, and the consultant proceeded with the geotechnical field investigations, some preliminary survey work, and production of base plans. Concurrently with this effort, processes associated with the 2010 Master Transportation Plan were underway. During one of the open houses, discussion ensued regarding a one-way couplet. This was uninitiated by engineering staff and unsupported by the 2010 Master Plan update document. This one-way couplet idea basically involved reducing Highway 19A between McVickers and McMillan down to 2 lanes of one-way traffic with angled parking on the south side. Jensen Avenue would also be 2 lanes, one-way traffic. Unfortunately, this discussion derailed the 2010 Master Plan, as well as the design work for both Jensen Avenue Extension and Corefield Street upgrades. So due to uncertainty generated at the open house, the city directed the consultant to halt the design work. This represented the second time the project was postponed in 15 years. And since these works were halted, no additional progress has been made to date. The Jensen Extension Capital Works project was pushed to the end of the 20-year plan for future consideration, and the Corefield upgrade work was subsequently scheduled for the 2015-2016. And that was based on the condition of the infrastructure and when it needed to be replaced. In recent budgetary processes, the Jensen Extension Capital Works was accelerated in the 20-year plan to 2018. That's where it sits right now. There we go. This was partially to address questions regarding the future development of 183 McVickers and the need to proceed with the Corefield upgrade, knowing the configuration is tied with the Jensen Extension. So, in terms of the modeling presentation, as I was saying, we had more extensive recent data collected, and that's been modeled by our consultant. Mike Skeen's group, Boulevard, was actually, their parent company now is Watt Consulting Group, and I'll hand it over to Mike now to give his presentation for consideration.
Okay, before you do that, the item on the agenda tonight is simply to receive for information that the report that the Director of Engineering dated March 8th, entitled Traffic Modeling Demonstration in and around downtown Parksville, be received. I have a mover and a seconder. Moved by Councillor Patterson, seconded by Councillor Beale. All those in favor? Opposed? Thank you. That is carried. Okay, you may proceed. Thank you, Boulevard Consultants, for coming this evening.
Yeah, thanks for having us. Thank you. So I'll go through this quick presentation, about 27 slides, I believe, and to give you some of the history and the implications of the Jensen Street connection, and maybe talk a little bit about Highway 19A and the implications to that as well. So what we're going to present is a 2030 growth to project to 2030 from 2015. We'll talk a little bit about 2015, and we'll show the traffic model results from 2030 using the existing network and with the Jensen connection to show you the difference. Also going to touch on the Island Highway, as I said, with some of the potential options that might be considered by council and the community. Before we start, I want to put a little context to the Jensen connection and what the original plan was. So this came out of the 84 Master Transportation Plan, and basically it was prior to the Inland Island Corridor, as we can all appreciate. So the Island Highway took most of the traffic up and down the island and connected with Alberni and the Parksville bypass. The Jensen, or Ring Road, was supposed to help traffic around the downtown core, make it more accessible by taking traffic off Highway 19 through different alternatives. So previously, Island Highway accommodated through traffic for the entire island, hampering the access to the downtown core. And this was seen as, the Ring Road was seen as an alternative to that. After the construction of the Inland Island Highway, traffic characteristics changed dramatically. And previous to that, the Inland Island Highway, we saw through traffic going island-wide or island length from Victoria to Courtenay, Campbell River, bypassing or driving through Parksville predominantly. After the Inland Island Highway, what we found was there's an increase in traffic in Parksville, but it was destination traffic. It was traffic that actually wanted to come to Parksville because they could travel up and down the highway easier. And you can appreciate the example of Mount Washington is a lot more accessible for people south, and that's becoming more popular. So that condition has kind of perpetuated over the years that Parksville is now a destination for this traffic, and this traffic that is on 19A and Alberni Highway. The modeling that we're going to reference today there's two traffic models, VISM and Synchro, and they're both industry standards approved by the Ministry of Transportation. Ministry of Transportation uses the results of these models, and so they're professional traffic models that are industry standard that we're going to be referencing and using for our analysis, or have been using for our analysis. So the existing conditions, the VISM model is a model that uses land use and nodes and links. So it actually creates traffic based on land use nodes. It assigns it to the roads based on travel time and delay, and calibrates through that algorithm. So what we do is we grab all the land use, we create the nodes and identify the links, and the model tells us what the volumes are. And we tweak it to represent existing conditions. So we counted traffic 2015, and we did the model based on 2015 to understand exactly what we've got from a model perspective and what we've got in the field. And so the base model that we're using was calibrated. There's 17,500 what we call average annual daily traffic, so it's averaged annually and averaged by day. So it's 17,500 per day near Craig Street on Highway 19A. And we measure that in the field as well, so we're in the same ballpark. On Jensen, again near Craig, just to pick a point, we've got 4,200 vehicles per day. So we know our calibrated model, our base model is ready to go, and these are the volumes that we're looking to analyze going forward. So we project the model out 20 to 2030, and that's to make sure that through growth and through other influences that the city, when we report back to the city, that we're giving them a good understanding of what's needed in the next 15 years. And so the model is growth based on population growth and land use changes in the VISM model. And what we find is that there's an increase on 19A of 15%, so 20,600 vehicles per day on the Island Highway. And on Jensen, there's an increase of 26%, which is 5,700 vehicles per day. The little sketch on the left shows you some order of magnitude increases. Kind of hard to read the bottom there, but Alberni Highway grows about 30% increase in traffic over the next 15 years. And Jensen Corefield Highway 19A grows from 15 to 30%. With McMillan, there's not much change projected on McMillan. So again, just to put that in perspective, we projected the land, we collected existing land use data, we projected it out with the planning department, and unless there's some really significant land use changes that we're unaware of, this is the results that we could expect. With the Jensen connection in place, it creates a little bit more of a dynamic there, or a change. And obviously we're talking about the extension from Corefield to McVickers to 19A. The traffic along 19A reduces by about 8% from compared to 2030 projected without the changes in network compared to 2030 with the changes in network. We've got a reduction of about 8%, so 19,000 vehicles per day. The traffic along Jensen, the downtown core, is projected to be about 9,800 vehicles per day. So that's an increase of about 4,100 vehicles per day, or 72%. So it's quite significant on Jensen. So there's an attraction to that traffic, and it's somewhat from 19A. So it does take that 8%, I guess we could call it, over to Jensen, but it also attracts a lot of traffic from Stanford and Despard. And again, if we think back of what that original plan was, to take traffic from 19A to, well, it was Highway 19 at the time, to Alberni, not to bypass the highway, but to go to Alberni, and the Alberni Highway going west on 19A. So it doesn't attract a lot of traffic off of 19A that's going east-west. It does facilitate those movements that go from northbound to westbound, or westbound to southbound, and eastbound to southbound. So I'm going to take you through some visual modeling, just to give you a representation of the video that we've got. So I mean, it doesn't show a lot other than order of magnitude, but this is existing conditions on the highway 2015, so current existing conditions. So just so you can appreciate, this is 4 times actual speed, just so that we're not sitting here all night. So it represents the queues that are out there now, the delays, and proportionally the amount of traffic. The different colors are blue is left, yellow is right turners.
Excuse me, so this is showing as an amalgamation of the 12 months a year? Is that what it's
an average, yeah.
It would be different if it was July versus February?
Yeah, so we've averaged it out for the whole year, and we actually did some counts for the city, and we found that there was a 10% 10% increase in traffic from summer to fall season, for example. We'll move on. So this is the 2030 model without the Jensen connection. You can appreciate some of the queues are longer, some of the delays are longer as well. I'm going to compare that to our final little video of Jensen with the connection. So maybe hard to tell, but quite a bit more traffic on Jensen. So once we have finished our modeling, we go forward and start looking at some of the other intersections that need to be looked at in a finer level of detail, which that model that we just showed does. So 2030 levels of service, green is good, red is bad. You can see the 4 locations we chose to demonstrate tonight: McVickers and 19A, Corfield and 19A, Jensen and Alberni, and McMillan and 19A. In 2030, without the connection of Jensen Avenue, it's all good levels of service for the next 15 years. With the connection at McVickers, we start to create more turning movements in the downtown core, requiring some mitigation. So the red and the orange are not good levels of service that need to have some attention paid to them. So westbound to southbound at McVickers on 19A, left turn Alberni, northbound to McMillan, and westbound Jensen to Alberni, and then McMillan left turn onto 19A are all movements that need to be looked at. And typically that would mean geometry changes and traffic signal timings, whether they needed left turn phases, left turn bays, longer left turn bays, whatever the case may be. We haven't looked at that in detail at this point. So the implications are that there's more than just the connection of Jensen that needs to be looked at if it goes ahead. So some of the pros and cons, just to maybe summarize that section of the presentation. The Jensen connection has shown us that it takes about 8% of the traffic off 19A, which might be a good thing. There's more options for circulation, In particular, the movement from going westbound on 19A to Alberni southbound. It takes traffic from Stanford, takes traffic from Despard, and that little bit on highway. So it accommodates those movements very specifically. The cons, the traffic on Jensen nearly doubles, and the level of services becomes C and D at 2030, which means you would probably, to just try to relate it, the congestion on 19A currently is probably at a C, and it's going to get a little worse. It's going to be at a D. So you'll see that on 19A, and you'll see that same kind of congestion on Jensen, just to put it in perspective. So pedestrian crossings, accessibility become a negative to Jensen than from what you have now, which is more a pedestrian-oriented street. There's those turning movements that I identified that need some geometric changes and potentially traffic signal changes. Again, those details haven't been looked at yet. The other thing is the 8% reduction on Island Highway does not mean that you have the ability to take lanes away from 19A. You will still need the existing cross-section to continue to accommodate the traffic on 19A. And in fact, if, I'll just leave it at that. So you'll still need that. So if that's a goal, then you don't accomplish it by having the Jensen connector. Just looking east at where it might be. You're all familiar with that. So one of the options that we had, there's the sketch for the Jensen connection and how it ties into McVickers and McVickers at 19A. One of the options we considered and talked with staff about is, well, if it's not needed from a capacity or circulation perspective, why not make it a greenway and save the right-of-way for the potential in the future of needing that connection for whatever reason. You still have that ability. So we've just offered that option out there as a cycling pedestrian greenway. Part of the discussion with staff has been, well, maybe one of the goals of the Jensen connection to McVickers is that the reduction of traffic on 19A. And so we looked at that, and as I mentioned earlier, the cross-section still is required. So you still need 2 lanes in either direction, moving vehicles, and left turn bays for safety. The function of 19A has changed slightly since the Inland Island Highway, obviously, and I mentioned it before. The traffic that's on 19A is really destined to the Parksville area. Whether it's destined to downtown or greater downtown or beyond downtown, it's still really localized traffic within Parksville. So this traffic is being accommodated on 19A, and so it needs to have that 5 lanes. However, we can look at other options. So we picked this. We haven't done any design work, but we're looking at McCarter, looking eastbound with the ocean on the left and the downtown on the right. So this is the cross-section that we've got. 2 lanes going eastbound, 2 lanes going westbound, left turn bay, and a painted median at this point. And the median and the paint changes and becomes raised along the corridor. But just picking this section as an example, these are some of the options that council can consider. So again, this is just a graphic representation of that same thing with the median, 2 lanes in either direction, the left turn, and the curbs and sidewalks. So the 2 yellow lines on the left and the right-hand side are the existing curbs. The green is just representing the existing median at that location. and roughly speaking, there's 2-meter sidewalks on either side, 4-meter lanes, through lanes, and 3.5-meter turning lane. Those lanes are very wide. Typical lanes are 3.35 to 3.5 meters, and so there's some playing around room that we can look at. So the first one we looked at was bike lanes. So we can go to 3.3 very easily in these lanes, and again, looking at the curbs, the yellow bars, the curbs don't change in this particular location. 1.7 meter bike lane, and you still maintain the 5-lane cross-section. The difference in this particular location is the median, the painted median would have to be repainted slightly smaller, but it's still located basically in the where it is now. Obviously, things would change if you wanted the bike lanes throughout the corridor, and we'd have to look at it a lot more closely of where pinch points are or where the road curves and changes. But the right-of-way basically is the same throughout the corridor. So this is, for all intents and purposes, a practical example of what could be accomplished. Cycle tracks is another example. Cycle tracks are becoming very popular in a lot of cities to do with cycling. Just a little side note on cycling, where cyclists feel safe, more cyclists cycle in that spot. The more cyclists, the safer it becomes. And that's a proven scientific fact. If anybody says bike lanes are safe, well, not necessarily, but that proven fact that the more cyclists on a facility, the safer it becomes. And the more cyclists is the perception of safety. So cycle tracks is one of those devices that are used to create the perception of safety for cyclists. Is usually buffered or barriered. And so we again show that through some painting, again, the existing curbs haven't been touched in the location, McCarter location that we're talking about. So just with some paint, the median's got to shift over from the existing median, which is the green line, where the proposed is the white. So that's an option. And from a tourist perspective, I think, a cycle track on the water side, you get a lot of the resort people cycling in and out of the downtown core. The other option we looked at was on-street parking. And so, again, keeping the 5-lane cross-section on the right-hand side of the slide where the tulips are, and there's an inset above that. That would be a curb bulb at the intersections or on-street parking behind the curb bulb. So the on-street parking would go on the store side. I mean, that's what we're offering, but it could go anywhere. But one of the things we're not recommending is this option because it does not provide for cyclists in any way. In fact, the lanes at 3.3 don't offer cyclists any kind of facility. So if this option were something that council wanted to push forward, it would be something that we'd really have to look at what are the alternatives for cycling through the city and through the downtown core, and looking at more closely this arrangement. But we wanted to look at that because we knew from a downtown perspective that might be a critical consideration. But again, keeping the 5-lane cross-section. So just to summarize, future traffic capacity does not warrant the need for a Jensen Road connection. In fact, if it does go in, that there is some mitigation that has to go on at other intersections. The road dieting on Highway 19A is possible without taking significant capacity, i.e. leaving the lanes the way they are, but reconfiguring them. Some of the options that we provided in this presentation is the active transportation corridor on Jensen between Corfield and McVickers as an interim, the cycle track, the bike lanes, and one-sided parking on 19A. But again, it's not recommended without the accommodation of cycling. So that's the end of our presentation, simply put. And
Well, thank you very much, and you've certainly given us a great deal to think about. Before I think tonight the main purpose of the meeting was to get public input, but just before I go for public input, Council, any comments, any questions at this point in time, or do we want to listen to what the good folk in the audience have to say? What's your pleasure? Yes, Councillor Beale.
I just wanted to say thank you at this point. Just thank you, and I really appreciate the extra information and insights about 19A and cycling and looking to the future. So thank you.
Councillor Greer.
Thank you, Your Worship. Well, since I've been on council, I've been for this Jensen extension. However, I appreciate your information tonight, and that does change somewhat. I know those models that you used, were you also considering the age of the population traveling on that road?
sure, of course.
Because it makes quite a difference whether you're traveling here or traveling maybe in Alberta somewhere. But the question I ask is that your organization really come forth in 1983 with the proposal and the thought that we would need that flow through the city. And here we are in 2016, and I don't know how much money we've spent on planning and engineering, but I think it probably was enough to pay for the road. So my question is, if we wait another 15 years, what's the cost going to be? And more design, and the cost of the road will certainly go up as well. So eventually this road, I believe, has to be built in order to create a better flow downtown and more activity for the businesses downtown. And it does take some pressure off the highway, which we're all concerned about, especially at the speed that they go at. Anyways, it was a good presentation and a lot of food for thought. Thank you.
Can I make one correction, sir? Our firm never got involved until 2002, so we didn't get all the benefit of that previous work.
Okay, Councillor Salter, Councillor Patterson, and then Councillor Oak. Are you in there too? Okay. So go ahead, Councillor Salter.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just want to thank you for a really good presentation and for providing us with that historical piece, because this has been going around, I'm sure, as you know, for a very long time, and the historical piece, which was always prior to the Inland Island Highway being built. So it makes a really big difference with regard to why it's carried on this far. So thank you very much. I think this was really valuable for us.
Thank you. Councillor Patterson.
Thank you, Worship. I'm just wondering if you could go back a couple slides to where it showed 2 bike lanes on the business side. Now,
Or either cycle
or.
track?
Well, I was looking at your numbers for the bike lanes, and that's at 1.5 and at 1.7, I believe, was the other.
That's right.
So my question is, would you when we consider bike lanes, do we also consider accessibility needs like the motorized type scooters and that would be using these lanes rather than the sidewalk lanes? Or
Well, I think that's a policy question. If it's on the road, cyclist is a vehicle, so these would be exclusive cycle lanes. If you're looking at accessibility scooters and that kind of thing, well, you'd have to mix that traffic and potentially cyclists. So there are some facilities that could be looked at that mixes that traffic, but basically what you'd be taking is the 1.7 and the 2-meter sidewalk and creating something more multi-use.
thank you.
Councillor Oat.
Thank you very much. I wanted to focus on that slide as well, the one that had the 2 bike lanes together. With our if that was an option that were to be pursued, how much of our existing infrastructure would have to be removed? Are any of our center medians in jeopardy, or is this something that can be just accomplished with paint?
The short answer is I don't know, because we haven't looked at it for the whole corridor, and it really depends on how much of that corridor that you want to look at. I was looking at it today, and you could do something, along Pioneer up to Corfield, and then from Corfield to maybe Alberni, maybe even Bay Street, I'm not sure, but just to make a connection. The medians probably would have to be reconfigured. It's not that you would lose them. It would mean that they would need to be rebuilt. I don't know about the curbs themselves, but just to take the idea and say at McCarter, we plot this cross-section on, we don't need to change curbs, and there's two long stretches either side of McCarter that look to me, without surveying, but look to me that they're identical. So you could get away for quite a distance with this kind of configuration without doing a lot of construction other than median construction, I think.
Councillor Beal. So we're now going to move to the. Do you want to make another comment, Councillor Greer, before we move on to the audience?
Thank you, Your Worship. The only comment I was making was with this form here with the two bikes or even a bike lane on each side, what happens when you get to the bridge and what happens when you get up to PIM? I'm sure if you're going to have bikes within a block or two, you're going to want a lot longer ride. So you'd have to do a lot more work, and it would be costly to put bike lanes all the way to the bridge and all the way to PIM, I would think.
Yeah, of course it would be, but I guess from a sectional perspective, in the downtown core, it'd probably be really attractive. And currently, you have some facilities, but not all, including the bridge. So it's just enhancing what you've got.
Councillor Powell.
Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you very much for the report. I'm curious, when you did the projections on 19A, did you have a look at the report that was done by the Economic Development Officer years ago, and they had some ideas about what we should do with that road for the downtown business area? Did you look at that before you went to this, or?
We didn't look at it specifically, but we were aware of it, and I've been through it. I think there is potential economic benefit to the Jensen connection, but the value of that, I don't know. And I don't know, if the $2 million is actually paid backable through economic development. I'm not an economist.
Do you have an answer?
Yes, Mr. Figueroa.
If I may, Your Worship, just to mention the downtown revitalization strategy mentions narrowing the lanes like this. So it is identified there. Wasn't part of that effort. I'm not sure how much economic evaluation was done, but that's one of the ideas to revitalize the downtown, was to pedestrianize the Highway 19A by narrowing the lanes just like this.
Follow up?
Yeah. So I'll through you to the Director of Acting CAO. And so I'm curious, because I remember that report when it came out, and there was more than these options on there, because it was a narrowing of the road. It was two-lane traffic. It was angle parking. And that's what I'm curious about. Did you look at all that other stuff that was in that report?
Yes.
And you still feel that this is the better way to go, and that's what you're recommending?
If I may, Your Worship, to Councillor Powell, that downtown revitalization did not recommend two-laning the highway without some significant transportation study done of the entire city. What it did recommend was narrowing the lanes. That was its main message. So.
And so you based the, you had the population increase 1.5% and I think 1.7, is that right?
1.2 and 1.5.
Okay, and so where did you get those figures? Did you connect it from the OCP?
Sorry, this is Nadine, my colleague here, and she's got all the real good facts. I'm just the speaker.
Okay, you're just a piece. Maybe.
So we got the growth rate based on what we've been seeing for the traffic volumes from 2008 to 2005. We did significant counts in 2008, and then with the 2015 counts, that is the growth rate we've been seeing in Parksville. So that's where the 1.5 came from. And I believe the 1.2 came from discussions with planning.
Councillor Beal.
Thank you, Your Worship, and I really appreciate that you seem to actually know the area and the streets involved. That's quite telling. And through to Councillor Greer, your concern about cyclists. People who cycle regularly through the area do use, as is suggested, Pioneer Crescent up to Corfield. And the challenge is, as was mentioned here, between Corfield and Bay, because at Bay then you can join on to Temple, and also due to the way that the shoulder's paved and so on. So those, in fact, that area is a particular problem for people cycling. And in fact, I recently spoke with a resident who is very frustrated because where he lives off Temple, he can't cycle to the park. You know, we'd have to go way out of the way without going on sidewalks, which cyclists should not be doing, certainly not adult cyclists. So you've identified the problem area very, very well, and I appreciate that.
Okay, we're going to move now to the audience for comments from the audience. And before I start inviting people to come down, would one of you mind sitting over beside Mrs. Tardif so that we have room and they can speak into the microphone and you can be there to answer? Just one final quick comment from me, and I'd rather have a buffer on both sides of the road in terms of the sidewalks. I'd rather have cycling on one side and cycling on the other side, but that doesn't mean anything. That's just the way that you can sit. Actually, you can sit here and you can use the microphone if you'd like, if you're needed. So, members of the audience, you're invited to come down and ask questions or make comments. I would ask you when you do arrive at the microphone to give us your name and your address. So, who's going to be first? Oh, don't tell me there's no questions. Can't be. All right.
As far as I understood it, it's a 10%.
I need your name and your address.
I'm Cindy Craig, and I live on Craig Street, and I have a business down on Morrison.
And you live on Craig Street?
And I live
That's
on
great.
Craig
Cindy Craig on
Yes.
Craig Street. That's very
And if I was on, I just want to make sure I understood it right. It's a 10% increase in the traffic flow by 2030, is that right?
I'll go back to that
think
slide
it was?
just to make sure we're talking about the same thing. So with the connection, there's an 8% decrease in traffic on Highway 19A and a 72% increase in traffic on Jensen.
That's with the connection.
Yeah.
So it would take from the 10% that's going to be on the Highway 19A, it would take 8% of that away. Is that how that works? Is that how
So-
that's...
So basically, right now, there's 17, sorry. Right now, there's 17,500 vehicles on the highway. Without the connection in 2030, we're looking at about 19,000, so a small increase. And then, we're going to 20,600 without the connector, and then we would bring that back down to about 19,000 with the connector. So, does that make sense?
And your survey, or your findings, said that eventually this is going to be an issue for Parksville. We are going to need the connector. Is that right?
No. From a traffic capacity perspective, there's no requirement for the Jensen connector.
At present,
Or in the future.
in the future. Okay, that was my question. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Next, who's next? Okay. Your name and address, please.
Hi, I'm Doug O'Brien from 1456 Seaway Drive in Parksville. I just have a couple questions, one for the consultant who's really close. Number one, that was a great presentation. Thank you very much. It was very well done and very understandable right from the start. My question I have first is, do you have any kind of idea what kind of percentage of traffic travels through on 19A all the way from one end going one way or the other that actually don't do any detours to the park or to the downtown businesses or at Craig Street or anything, do you have, your software was kind of cool, showing everybody going along back and forth and then turning left and turning right. But from my own personal observation, like in the morning, like 9-ish in the morning, there's a group of traffic that goes right from the Orange Bridge, picks up a couple people from Pioneer and so forth, and it carries all the way through, and it goes right through town, either turning up the Alberni Highway, turning left on the Alberni Highway or right, whichever way they come from, or carrying on through past the Oceanside Place Arena and carrying on through to French Creek and Qualicum. It kind of surprises me because I think, like, who are these people that are actually just driving through Parksville? Parksville itself is really not getting any benefit from it. The businesses aren't. They're not really going to the park. There's a block that just goes through. Now, maybe that's just the time of day that I'm driving type of thing. But it just seems to me that this group is just going through and using it as a connector instead of, I would hope or think that maybe if they're saving gas and time, that they'd jump up onto the Inland Island Highway Island connector and bypass Parksville and go right through to Qualicum. I know it's really lousy access to get down to French Creek from that the Inland Island Highway, but Qualicum has a very good access. But it just seems the same block just kind of goes right through, and I think, well, where are you going and why are you cutting through our town? Because you're just adding to our traffic, which doesn't really help our situation. I'm just wondering, do you have any idea of what kind of percentage that is that it go through, or have you noticed that yourself?
The answer is no, we don't know. But we go through the same kind of rationale, like who would be doing that? And the fact that they're doing it must mean that they're relatively local. So I'm not sure if Nanoose Bay is relatively local to French Creek, but they're relatively local. I assume that because they're using 19A, they're using gas stations and fast food restaurants, and they are stopping through at some points, so they are a benefit from an economic perspective. But to actually quantify that number is very, very difficult and expensive, and we don't know.
Thank you. Thanks very much. That is helpful. My hope tonight, or what I kind of envisioned, what I thought was probably going to be more consideration for safe pedestrian access along 19A, and I was hoping that there was some kind of traffic calming that was going to come from this proposal. I mean, you did exactly what you were paid to do, and I appreciate that. But I was hoping that there was some way that we could get it, because I was thinking that the previous presentations we had were actually the 19A was restricted down to, say, 3 lanes, and it was going to make it easier because somehow, some way, our downtown core and businesses have been separated by our greatest asset of all, which is our community park and beach. And we now have 5 lanes of road dedicated to traffic. I was hoping that there would be some kind of slowdown of 19A, therefore to get pedestrian access more conducive to coming from the community park, coming up to our downtown businesses, and back and forth. You know, like, I mean, the people are using the park not just in the summertime. I appreciate the tourists when they're here, but right now, spring break, this place is packed again, and they're going back and forth. So I was hoping there'd be some traffic calming. With that in mind, the only way that could be accomplished is to push through a proposal of the Jensen extension, which I would support as a good idea if it would take some of the pressure off 19A to turn it into maybe 3 lanes and so forth by taking a percentage of that traffic, push it on to Jensen as well. So I was just hoping somehow that we were trying to get, we have the ocean side and we have the downtown side. And unfortunately, we have these 5 lanes of traffic, and it's very pedestrian unfriendly. And it's really to the point we have very interesting demographics here in Parksville. And I see people jaywalking, and it's maybe, you know, just from Thrifties over to Quality Foods, and then jaywalking from the Dairy Queen over to the park. And someone is going to get hurt seriously. And I see it all the time, and people are trying to do it, and 5 lanes of traffic is really a long way to go. So if somehow we could incorporate shutting down one of those lanes on 19A, slow down the traffic, get some parking in there, get the bike lanes in there as well, because the young families love the bike lanes, but also alleviate and then have more great number of pedestrian crossings to go to connect the beach with the downtown. It's going to be good for the downtown core, the businesses, but also good for the people to get across safely. That's where I would support a Jensen extension if we could do that, and then have the highway slow down and actually take the time to enjoy what Parksville has to offer instead of just a place to drive through. Thank you.
Just a clarification.
Let's keep it calm and cool, folks, okay? Everybody's going to get a chance to talk.
Just a clarification. So what our modeling shows is the Jensen connector takes 8% of the traffic off of 19A, which is not significant. And so to narrow 19A doesn't force traffic onto Jensen connection. It might force traffic to Qualicum and Nanaimo and forget about Parksville. So I just want to kind of raise that concern as well. The other part of that discussion is there is potential through our illustration with the bike lanes for traffic calming. You know, it really just, you know, what we showed was what you might be able to do with minimal expense. But if that's a major goal, there is some flexibility, and that's what we were trying to show, that we can still have the 5 lanes, but they're so wide that you've got to cross all those 5 lanes, plus the median, which isn't always a good median. And if we could diet the road and maintain those 5 lanes, there's a possibility there as well.
Great. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next question, comment. Good evening.
Good evening. Hi, I'm Sandy Hurley. I have a business in town, and I live at 253 Lodgepole. I just probably want to ditto what has just been said. I think the council should look at what the purpose of this is. Is it to get traffic through town? Is it to become traffic-oriented? Or should we encourage pedestrianization? Looking at our businesses, I don't actually agree in thinking that if you narrow the highway or cut it down to 3, as a business owner, that I'm going to chase the potential clients to Qualicum. I think I'll slow traffic down. I think that the big question is, and having been here and been there, it's time to start looking at the bigger vision of what you want Parksville to be. And if you're going to take it a section at a time, we're always going to be that community that's being piecemealed instead of looked at a larger vision of where we want to be in 20 years or 30 years. What do we want our community to look like? And in taking a transportation study, which I appreciate is what Boulevard was tasked to do, but we need to start looking at the larger picture of what do we want this town to be? What do we want it like for our grandkids or our great-grandchildren, that kind of thing. And I think that the reason that we are the 4 lanes plus that boulevard, it served its purpose at the time. It was how to get to Campbell River. It's no longer how to get to Campbell River. We have the inland highway that we can certainly use. And it's if you want traffic to go Jensen, which I understand we don't need at all for at least the next 15 years. It's just something that isn't needed. When it was first thought of in 1983, which was before I lived here, it was needed. It was to have other ways of getting through town instead of coming on the Island Highway. Don't see that it's needed, but we absolutely need to stop this division of the park and the waterfront from the downtown core. We need to encourage pedestrianization because that's what people want in this community, regardless of age. I have clients that are extreme seniors that walk all the time and enjoy walking, but don't find it safe. Don't find it safe on the sidewalk on 19A. It's nervous for them. And then, of course, parking downtown can be a bit of a challenge. So I appreciate the presentation. It was very good. What I got out of it is we don't need the ring road or whatever it's going to be called. And I think that we need to start looking at our community as a whole. What do you want? What does this council want and the next council? Because you're not going to be the last ones. Believe me. And things change. But you still want to know, what do we want to be as a community? And from my perspective as a business owner, you know, where do I see myself as a business owner? I have 12 staff. We employ 12 people. And I enjoy that, appreciate it very much, as do they. So, thank you.
Okay. Who's next? Oh, come on. It's got to be more than that. Come on down.
I'm Judy Allen, 217 Evergreen Street. I just have a question about the 17,500 average cars per day. Could you put that in perspective to, say, Douglas Street in Victoria? I have no idea what 17,000 cars going back and forth would look like. Can you, for the volume on the highway?
So 17,500 vehicles a day is what you experience there now.
That's, yes.
Right.
Can you put that in perspective to, say, as I said, Douglas Street in Victoria or somewhere else? I can't put it together as to what that would be. Whether that's a lot or not very many. I drive there every day back and forth. I don't see the congestion at all, except in the summer.
Yeah, it's on the high side of a major road. I think Douglas Street might be around 30,000 in Victoria, but again, the illustration is what you've got there now is 17,500. Yeah.
So 30-odd thousand, that puts it in perspective. Okay, one more question. I live on Evergreen Street, which at the present time is a dead end. I've seen several plans, if this Jensen extension goes through, as to whether Evergreen will remain dead end or will connect with the Jensen extension.
To the best of my knowledge, Evergreen hasn't popped up for anything, has it, Victor Figuera?
On the one you showed, it showed it going across and ending this much on the other side of Jensen.
If I may,
I know
Worship.
this is a personal thing, but there are several of us here from that street, and that's our concern.
If I may, Your Worship, the final configuration obviously hasn't been finalized yet, but the idea would be, if the Jensen extension went through, the idea would be that Evergreen would intersect with the Jensen extension. It wouldn't go any further north past Jensen, but it would connect with Jensen extension.
Why?
Good question.
Good question. Why? Why would you put traffic down a one-block street
as opposed to
where kids are playing?
As opposed to a dead
and
end?
have been for 35 years.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Are you suggesting to not put it through and leave it as a dead end?
Yeah. Yeah. It's cheaper.
It's almost there, but it would be cheaper, definitely.
Yeah.
I can't argue with that. But in terms of circulation, the thought was to put it through. I mean, we still have to look at it. I can take that into consideration when we look at the design and to see what that would look like.
Okay, thank you.
Next, I see this lady over here waiting. When you give us your name and your address, you might want to tell us your role at the present time. I think that's important for the audience to know.
Sandra Hobson from 447 Pym Street, and I am also chair of Access Oceanside Association, which is interested in inclusion and accessibility. So I certainly am concerned about pedestrian and powered mobility device access. In terms of whether or not we do the extension. Currently, you're right, Jensen is fairly pedestrian friendly, and there are several senior facilities, living facilities along there, and so pedestrian safety would be an issue, a continuing issue for the extension and for the sidewalks with like proper curb cuts, etc. And it certainly is a concern along Island Highway. I know I frequently take my scooter to the park and back, and I avoid Island Highway to the extent possible. There's a couple of block period where I cannot get through without going along, and so sidewalks and good curb cuts and so on are very important. So although it sounds at this point as if until now, till 2030, we may not need an extension, if it is put in, please consider pedestrian and powered mobility device access. And if we don't think it's needed now, the projection is as far as 2030. Having lived in several other cities where many years later they were very sorry they hadn't made any provision for future expansion, I think the notion of making it a greenway for now so that you preserve the potential is probably a smart move, rather than later having to, if you decided to go forward, having to expropriate property and so on. So thank you very much. It was a very interesting presentation, and I appreciated your notion about cyclists, though that's not in my future and a long way in my past, but thank you.
Thank you, Sandra. I just want to make a comment about the presentation by Sandra Hurley. And, it's a big task, and I know that Sandra knows that more than anybody. And it's the proverbial question: how do you eat an elephant one bite at a time? Because this whole issue of traffic and transport and public safety and pedestrianization is a big one. And so I just wanted to make that comment. Next presenter, next question. Oh, thank God. I thought it was. Nobody's getting out of here early tonight, so. Your name and your address, please.
Michelle Jones, and I have a business in Parksville on Weld Street. I just had one question for the consultant in the city, and that is, did the model that you ran take into account the Shelley Road Stanford Avenue connection that's going to be done this year, and whether that will pull traffic off of the highway?
No, not specifically. We probably have it modeled. We just didn't analyze that, and we could pull the numbers out for the city and staff at a later date.
Then follow up. I mean, as you're aware, as part of the Downtown Business Association, we want to slow traffic down through town. And moving people through town as fast as possible is not our goal. So we need to find a way to slow people down through town. And, I mean, bypassing them around town, the people that are going to go through anyway, Stanford Avenue is a great option. They're going to have a light there probably next year or the year after. So we need to try to slow people down. And I don't know if any of you have ever tried walking down the sidewalk along the Island Highway. It's scary. So we need to slow that traffic down on the highway. I know the bike lanes would help that, but then you just have to dodge bikes and not cars. At least you won't get hurt as bad. You might not be as scared. But I think we need to find a way to slow the traffic down on the highway and pedestrianize the downtown.
Thanks very much. That's for me. We have another contestant.
Can I just make a comment?
Yeah, go ahead.
Just on we're hearing traffic calming and slowing traffic down. The lane widths you have now are so wide they're accommodating fast traffic. So whatever you do to narrow it, whether it's widen sidewalks, add bike lanes, that'll help.
Having driven on Granville Street and Oak Street in Vancouver, you don't go too fast because you'll lose your side mirrors. Yes, next, sir. Your name and your address, which I know by heart, but you have to do it probably.
Al Pastors, 211 Lodgepole. Everybody's talking about calming the traffic on 19A, and yes, narrowing the lanes is going to do that to some extent. Let's take the simple way and just put a traffic light on every friggin' corner. That way, they are going to slow down, and the through traffic are going to go on Stanford and Despard and the like, and the people that are on the highway are going to have to make stops at all the red lights, and that will slow it down. There you go.
Okay. How much is a traffic light? A couple of $100,000?
It's
Yeah.
sorry, it's about $200,000, and traffic signals increase crashes, so you'd have a huge safety issue.
Okay. Next, anybody else from the audience that has any comments? Come on, it's still early, folks. You can go early if you want. Welcome back.
I looked around to make sure no one else. Okay. So what's next? Oh, Sandy Hurley, 253 Lodgepole.
Well, when I talked about, eating an elephant one bite at a time, the first decision we're going to have to make, and when Mr. Figuera comes back with the project with regards to the renovation or the upgrade and the infrastructure changes that are going to be made on Corfield, at that time we'll be given some options. One of the options, I think, is going to be, do we do the Jensen Street extension? So we have to make that decision. And once that decision is made, there'll be others that come along with regards to traffic and traffic calming, and we'll make those decisions as we go along. I mean, tonight the real purpose was to show everybody what the situation looks like. Look at, we're hearing a number of comments that it doesn't appear that the Jensen Street extension, everybody wants to see it happen. So we'll have to look at that with Mr. Figuera when he talks about the reason that we wanted to deal with the Jensen Street extension at this point in time is because Corfield is next. Corfield is going to be done very shortly. It's going to go out to tender, so that because Jensen crosses Corfield, what do we do? So that's what's next in terms of the immediate future. In looking at the capital projects and looking at the plans and looking at traffic calming in general, I think some of the ideas tonight with regards to narrowing the lanes, it's been a favorite of mine. I can't speak for all of council, but I think narrowing lanes is the first step. And I believe there's a lot of support to getting cycling on 19A. So we'll have to look at that in terms of what we've seen tonight and how that might fit into future plans.
I was going to say, would pedestrianization also fit into that conversation?
I think from now on, pedestrianization is going to be part and parcel of any decisions that we make. I really do. I believe that.
Okay. And sorry, just one more.
Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
One more question. Will we have an opportunity, as you know, that I am the president of the Downtown Business Association, and will we have an opportunity to submit also some
Anytime.
others? Because we've received this like you have tonight, so perhaps there are other things that we may want to comment on after speaking with the downtown businesses that we will represent.
We have an ongoing program of infrastructure replacement and renewal, and I think that from now on, aside from looking at just what that means and what it's going to do, is looking at those other implications, such as traffic calming and pedestrianization. I think we'll throw that into the mix.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, I have some names here. Councillor, who was first? Councillor Beal and Councillor Patterson.
Thank you, Your Worship.
Wait a minute. We're not done with the comments from the audience, so let's leave that till the end, okay? Sorry. You're next. Name and address,
Well,
please.
I wasn't going to come up. Charlie Stone, 624 Island Highway West, because I arrived late. But I've heard from talking with the people near me that I was just curious, when you were given the task, if you studied the one-way. I'm not saying that it's good or whatever. I'm just curious about that. The one, do you know what I mean?
Do you want me to answer? So in 2010, I think we looked at it. I don't remember all the pros and cons, but I remember that it was a huge dollar figure, and that we got a lot of opposition through the public process for any kind of one-way coupling.
The overwhelming comments I got about anything in the line of a one-way here, one-way there was no, almost 90-some% no. Okay, any more comments from the audience? And I'll come back to council at some point in time. One more, or maybe more, I don't know. Come on down.
Sandy came up twice, so here I am again. I'm Doug O'Brien still. Is it possible to make a suggestion at this time, since the consultant has done a great job and all these facts and figures that we have here are current, right up to date? Could we ask the consultant to then make another proposal as to a pedestrian, slowing down the traffic on 19A to making it more accommodation for pedestrian friendly, and if that means to justify the Jensen extension, but to actually come up with a proposal like you've done here, but this has been mostly for traffic. This has been for cars and vehicles. How about coming up with a proposal for pedestrians, power scooters, and all access through this very same 19A corridor through downtown? Could we do that? While we have everything going, you're well on your way. You've got all the facts and figures ahead of you. That would be council and Mr. Vergara's decision, but I just think the iron's hot right now, and I really think that we need to do something about it, because we talked about the downtown revitalization, and this slowing down traffic is going to do a lot to revitalize downtown, making it safer for people to walk along that island highway 19A right now. So that would really help our downtown core and our park all at the same time. So as Sandy says, when are we going to get on with it? We've talked about it so long. This, I think, would be a big step to helping us achieve that goal with our downtown revitalization at the same time. Just a suggestion.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Good evening.
My name is Smith. I live in 215 Evergreen. The little dotted line there on the extension, we live about 50 feet south of that line. Our front window faces that line. So you can guess that I am against that thing going through there, especially when a lot of people said it's not necessary. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay. Second timers.
Anybody else getting two kicks at the cat? So I'm still Al Pastors. Same place, haven't moved. I'm looking at this particular slide, and there's a part there that just sort of hit me, that the traffic along Jensen is going to increase by 4,000 vehicles a day. The way that Jensen is built currently, like dead ending at Corfield, and I'm just now talking about the sidewalks along Jensen, the stop sign just out here at Craig, that's all going to have to change, because if you're going to add 4,000 vehicles to Jensen the way it is right now, because they're going to kind of come bombing through from McVicker, you're going to have some major changes to do on Jensen, and it's going to be very uncomfortable to be walking on Jensen now instead of just on the highway. All you're doing is spreading the problem. Thanks.
Interesting observation. Thank you. Any further questions? Okay, I don't see any further questions from the audience, so I'm going to go back to council. Councillor Beale, and then Councillor Patterson.
Thank you, Worship. Just an information piece that we are expecting a master transportation review. We don't have that date yet, but it is anticipated in the fairly near future, so I think that will provide a lot of additional information and have a larger scope than just this area as well.
There's a lot of things going on. Councillor Patterson.
Thank you, Worship. Councillor Beale echoes my sentiments. But when we looked at doing this particular road work and calming and narrowing down the traffic lanes, did we look at altering any of the highway zones, the kilometers per hour, and lowering any of that at
at all?
Not specifically, but they could be considered.
I think if you narrow the lanes, you'll get slower speeds automatically without having to.
Can I have a follow-up as well, Your Worship? In different areas of the world, and that I had a resident come in who'd been in Europe, and they posted some very large speed numbers, like on the way into town, and that we don't have a whole lot of kilometers per hour through the highway, and I think that's where we see a lot of speeding and everything going on as well. But because there's just so much going on the highway, and that a sign gets lost. And so have you ever looked at some other calming measures, like, or visual aids that, like on posting a great big 40-kilometer-an-hour, like after the Orange Bridge, for example, or any of the, not sure what they're called, the little road bumps, speed bumps by crosswalks or anything for calming measures as well?
Again, we haven't looked at it specifically in this application, but there are options to consider. HCBC is supporting the variable message speed reader boards, and that might be a nice addition for reminding people the speed and the speed that they're going.
Okay, folks. Well, we've managed to keep you for an hour and 21 minutes. Oh, Councillor Oates, I'm sorry.
Currently, the Jensen Avenue extension is slated for 2018. Is that correct? How much money is budgeted for that?
It's in excess of $2 million. That's just for the roadworks themselves. Yeah.
So it would be $3 million, $4 million to do everything? How much money we got to spend if we throw this project away and redirect it to something better for the citizens? How much money?
I don't know if I want to mention the exact figure.
No.
But, we're talking in excess of $2 million to do the road itself. But then as the presentation showed, you put the Jensen extension in, and now by 2030, you've got other things that you need to deal with. The turning movements the level of service drops in I think three of the locations that you would have to also invest in. To say nothing of the pedestrian improvements that you would need to do across Jensen to counteract the additional volume we've got on Jensen, so that the downtown doesn't become an island unto itself.
So the challenge for us then is we have to determine, I think there's a shared desire among council to increase the pedestrian friendliness of downtown and along the highway. I think there's a shared interest on council to do something to assist the downtown business communities. The challenge is how do we get the best bang for our buck to do that? And I appreciate this presentation here tonight, because while it might not show where we should put our money, it probably pretty clearly shows where we shouldn't. Thanks.
And just to comment to that, I can see dollar signs in Councillor Oates' eyes, because that money is in the bank. It's to be spent not necessarily on that, but on something else. So here we go. Councillor Salter.
Well, thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I just want to say I think it's important that moving forward with this, and this project has been in the works for, I know that the houses that were on the street on Jensen were expropriated back in the 80s. That was the beginning of this. So it's been going on for a very long time. And a lot of people have been impacted by it. So I think that it's important that we include the community in this in a really meaningful way as we move forward. And I think we need to really bring this to a closure. And hopefully it would be our council that is able to provide that for the community.
We'll have that opportunity on the 21st or the 4th, I believe, Mr. Figuera. Councillor Powell.
Thank you, Your Worship. I was calling you Your Honor. So, there's a really simple fix, right, to start with. I think that and this is a question through the Mayor to Mr. Figuera, we have the lights that are set up on 19A are not set up for pedestrians. They're set up for traffic. I know when I cross this road at the Dairy Queen, it takes forever for that walk sign to come up. And I think, are we able, as the city, to adjust the walk signs so that when you hit that, like if we want to make it pedestrian friendly, I think we have to act like it's pedestrian friendly. And is there a way for the city to change those light systems so it's a faster walk signal on all the different lights along Highway 19A? That would slow down traffic. This is, we talk one thing, but we act another, is what it feels like to me. And so can you answer that question for me? Just a nice, easy question.
Figuera. Tell her all the traffic lights are all also good.
If I may, Your Worship, through to Councillor Powell. I know the crosswalk you're talking of, him. That is timed, and you're right, in such a way because the proximity of the neighboring intersections to there, and that at peak times, if we were just to immediately respond to a pedestrian pressing that crosswalk, you would get, the traffic would back up quite a ways and cause issues. That's why. Well, that's just it. I mean, no, I can't deny that. I mean, it's that way so that our traffic doesn't back up in through intersections. That's why it's there. I think if we look at that corridor, there are things we can do, as mentioned. There are things we can do to make it more pedestrian friendly, and of course we'd be looking at timing, narrowing the lanes. All that stuff can be looked at, and certainly that's something that we would be looking at as part of that exercise. So, okay.
Okay, we're going to, this is going to go on for quite some time, this issue. The 21st of March or the 4th of April on the next agenda when we talk about, which is on the agenda, either on one of those agendas, as Mr. Figuera has said, we'll be resolving the first bite of the elephant with regards to what we do with the Jensen Street extension. We got some very good feedback tonight. And once again, I want to assure you that this whole issue of pedestrianization, the traffic calming, I've lived here for 20 years, and I refer to 19A as the speedway, not even the highway, because people speed all the time. I do it every day, and it's terrible to watch the speeding that goes on there. But we'll be dealing with this over time, and we're not going to deal with it all tonight because we'll be here till it's only an hour and 27 minutes. We'd be here for another 4 hours. Thank you all very, very much for coming. Don't hesitate if you've got more questions and more comments to let us know. Give us feedback. We'd appreciate it. And we're having a council meeting on Thursday night, St. Patrick's Day, in this very room at 6 o'clock. So we'll see you then. Thank you.